Good evening to the listeners, especially to you, Miss Shalalaine Romulo. This is Kristen Maid Kala from Biolil SD1-1, and this presentation is from Group 5. This time, we will be presenting the topic which is monitor model. Through this presentation, you will know how monitor models say in second language acquisition. To start with it, let me introduce you the reporters. The reporters are Kosi Elmer Gabriel, Donairi John Marie, and Edkala Kristen May. Contents Part 1 Definition and Theoretical Development. Part 2 Area of Concern and Major Proponent. Part 3 Key Assumptions and Method of Analysis. Part 4 Sample Studies and References. Definition and Theoretical Development. In monitor model, the monitor acts in a planning, editing, and correcting function when three specific conditions are met. The second language learner has sufficient time at their disposal. They focus, inform, or think about correctness. They know the rule. This monitor model theory suggests that we should both strive to increase our second language inputs, like viewing videos, television, and going through books for reading, and make sure we receive proper error correction in one form or another. It is the best known model of second language acquisition, influenced by Chomsky's theory of first language acquisition. Krashen developed 5 hypotheses about second language learning. These hypotheses offer insight into how to help students learn to communicate in a second language. Krashen's 5 hypotheses. First, acquisition or learning hypothesis. This hypothesis has two different processes: spontaneous versus conscious. Natural order hypothesis. Grammar is acquired in a predictable order or in a natural setting. Monitor hypothesis. Learning functions only as an editor or monitor. Fourth, input hypothesis. For acquisition, comprehensible input is essential. Fifth, affective filter hypothesis. In this hypothesis, acquisition occurs when affective conditions are optimal, like for example, low anxiety, confidence, motivation, and etc. Area of concern and major proponent. According to Krashen's monitor model, studying the structure of language can have holistic educational benefits and value that high schools and colleges may want to incorporate into their language programs. Much depends on whether the learner is already familiar with the language. Analyzing language, formulating rules, eliminating irregularities, and conveying complex facts about the target language is not language education. The anxiety-based affective filter hypothesis is a barrier to language learning. Also, monitor hypothesis describes the use of acquisition and learning. There is utterance in acquisition where the learned system monitors the utterance. Monitor assures the accuracy of utterance. Monitor users are of 3 types, and these are the monitor over users, monitor under users, and optimal monitor users. Stephen Krashen's monitor model might be the most cited theory for learning a second language, but has also received much criticism about the predictable order of grammar structures. That will be all in part 1 and part 2. Thank you so much for your interest and attention. This is Kristen Miidkala saying goodbye to you.
Good evening, everyone, especially to you, Miss Sheila Lane. I am Donairi John Marie from Group 5, and I am assigned to present the 3.5 key assumptions of monitor model or second language acquisition. What does it say about SLA or second language acquisition in general? So, It was the shift in direction from the idea that language is a learned behavior to language more innate that leads to a rise of SLA theories like Krashen's 1982 monitor model, also known as the input hypothesis, Chomsky's universal grammar, and the long interaction hypothesis. Krashen's monitor model is the following set of SLA hypotheses, which emerge out of much research into SLA. The monitor model has been proposed as a general model for adult second language performers have two means of internalizing the rules of a target language. Language acquisition, which is primarily subconscious, is not influenced by overteaching or error correction, and is very similar to primary language acquisition in children. Language learning, which involves the conscious representation of pedagogical rules and is influenced by teaching and error detection. The model hypothesis that learning is available to the adult second language performer only as a monitor, that people use conscious grammar only to alter the output of the acquired system. Next slide, please. 3.6 Method of Analysis. How does it conduct its investigation? As for the monitor hypothesis, Krashen argued that the language which one subconsciously acquires is responsible for fluency, whereas the language that one consciously learns acts as an editor. Such a conscious editor is sometimes termed the monitor. The structure of the language can have general educational advantages and values that high schools and colleges may want to include in their language programs. It should also be clear that analyzing the language, formulating rules setting irregularities apart, and teaching complex about the target language is not language but rather language appreciation or linguistics, which does not lead to communicative proficiency. The model is essentially a theory of processing a second language, but it may have some implication for first language as well. What Krashen posit is that an adult second language performer can internalize the rules of a target language via one of a separate system, an implicit way called subconscious language acquisition and an explicit way conscious language acquisition is similar if not identical to the process by which children acquire first language. That would be all, miss. Thank you.
Good evening, Miss. Good evening, everyone. So, in this part, it contains the two sample studies that we have gathered. So, the first sample studies that we have gathered is the monitor model, some methodological considerations. The model claims that adult second language performers have two means of internalizing the rules of a target language. First is language acquisition. It's primarily subconscious and not influenced by overteaching or error correction. Second, second is language learning, which involves the conscious representation of pedagogical rules and influenced by teaching and error detection. Furthermore, the model hypothesized that learning is available to the adult second language performer only as a monitor. Thus, an attempt is made to outline an alternative model that more precisely accounts for the data and that relates to a theory of human information processing in general. For example, according to McLaughlin, there are two different subjective experiences. For example, I seem to have as I process my speech in another language. The first experience, I seem to be operating by feel. I feel immediately that something is wrong with the sentence. While in the second case, I seem to operate more by rule. I think that something is wrong with the sentence. But in order to be sure, I have to go back to a rule have tucked away that tells me the correct grammar grammatical structure of the sentence. So the sample studies number two is a critical evaluation of Krashen's monitor model. This study determines the influential theory of second language acquisition, focusing on a critical analysis of Krashen's monitor model. In addition, it provides a detailed explanation of the 5 hypotheses that support Krashen's evidence model. Thus, the paper examines the contributions of the theory and discusses criticisms of the theory based on relevant empirical studies. Next slide, please. So, in this part, it contains the references of our sources that we have gathered, and that would be all, miss. Thank you and God bless.